Before we begin, let me ask you something. Have you ever stood at the grave of the person you loved most, only to realize you never truly knew them at all? That moment when your world collapses, not because they're gone, but because of the truth they left behind. This isn't just a story. It's my life. And everything changed at my husband's funeral. If you've ever been betrayed in silence, stay with me. Subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? The day of William's funeral was gray in a way that didn't feel like weather. It felt personal, the kind of sky that presses down on you, reminding you how alone you really are. Even when you're surrounded by people, I arrived at the church early. Too early. I had spent hours choosing what to wear, dark, conservative, respectful. The widow. That was who I was now. For 27 years, I was William's wife. Not a glamorous life, no country clubs or penthouses. Just quiet evenings, holidays with the two of us, a few vacations every now and then. We didn't have children. I couldn't, and William never pressed me for it. He said I was enough. He said that often. He also said he had to travel for work. 6 months out of every year in another state. Logistics and consulting, he told me. Corporate contracts. He hated technology, avoided phones, said he was old-fashioned. And I believed him when I stepped inside that church. I didn't expect to see unfamiliar faces filling the pews. I assumed they were from his work, friends I'd never met. But something felt off. People weren't looking at me with sympathy. They were looking at me like I didn't belong there. Then I saw her, a woman about my age, standing stiff at the front. Dressed in black like me, but her grief looked angry, not broken. Beside her stood two adults, a man in his 30s and a woman not much younger. They looked at me as if I were poison. And I didn't understand why. Not until the service ended. I was walking toward the exit when I heard a voice, sharp, male. Loud enough to turn heads. Unbelievable. She has the nerve to show her face here. I froze and turned. The man, one of the grown children, was pointing at me. His mother, the other woman, grabbed his arm, but it was too late. The words came spilling out. You ruined our family. You were nothing but a mistress. And now you want pity? Mistress, laughter, scoffs, murmurs spread like wildfire. I couldn't breathe. I looked at the woman. Her eyes weren't confused. They were full of pain. She knew who I was. She knew. And yet, I had no idea who she was. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My legs carried me out of the church, my heart pounding so hard I couldn't hear the world anymore. Later that night, I sat alone on the floor of my living room. Lights off, shoes still on. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I was frozen in a kind of shock that made time slow down. William had a wife. Another wife, children, a life. Those 6 months away each year, that was them, and me? I wasn't the wife. I was the other woman. The thing is, I had no idea. And somehow, that made it worse. Because now I wasn't just grieving a husband, I was grieving a life I never truly had. And everyone thought I'd known all along. The silence in my house was no longer peaceful. It was accusing. I wandered from room to room like a stranger in my own life, touching things that once brought comfort. The smell of William's cologne still lingered faintly on the collar of his jacket, hanging by the door. I should have gotten rid of it. I couldn't. Everywhere I turned, his ghost was there, not angry, just secretive. 20-7 years. A life I thought we built together, holidays, birthdays, anniversaries. All of it now felt like a stage play. Because while I was writing love notes and planning dinners for his return, he was holding someone else's hand in another state, celebrating another child's birthday, kissing another woman goodnight, and still, I loved him. That's what made the betrayal feel like it carved straight through bone. I sat on the couch, clutching our wedding photo. I studied it for answers I knew I wouldn't find. Had there been signs? The late-night calls he took outside? The suitcase he never let me pack? Was it really possible that I had chosen not to see? My phone buzzed. A message from a mutual friend or someone I thought was a friend. It only said, "Saw what happened at the funeral. I can't believe you'd do that to his real family. Don't contact me again, real family." Those words cut through me sharper than anything I'd heard at the funeral, but it didn't stop there. That night, I discovered a string of posts spreading online, photos from the service. My face blurred but still recognizable. The mistress who showed up in black, one caption read. Another said she lived off his money while he was dying. And one more, she was just waiting for him to die so she could cash in. I felt sick. My email inbox was overflowing with hate, messages calling me a liar, a thief, a snake. Some were from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Others were from strangers. No one asked me what I knew. No one cared. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at the kitchen table, staring at the floor, sipping tea I couldn't taste. By morning, I was numb. And still, a part of me clung to the smallest thread of hope. Maybe this was all some misunderstanding. Maybe Helena had misunderstood William. Maybe those weren't his children, maybe, but when I finally looked through our financial records, the truth hardened. There were flights every 6 months, exactly on schedule, regular wire transfers, a second health insurance policy, rent payments for a home I'd never seen. Every lie was now backed by a paper trail. I felt like a fool. A woman over 50, mocked online, left with no one to defend her. No children of my own. No siblings. No family left to turn to. Just me and the ghost of a man who had loved me quietly. While building a louder life somewhere else, I started locking the doors more often. Jumping at knocks. At the grocery store, I could feel eyes on me. Whether they were actually watching or not, I didn't know, but paranoia had planted roots. I walked with my head down, like a criminal. Sometimes I wondered if this was punishment. Was I so desperate to believe in love that I let it blind me? Was the comfort of our routine so soothing that I chose ignorance over suspicion? Or was I truly just a victim of a man's double life? I didn't have the answers, not yet. But I knew one thing: the Margaret who smiled through pain, who stayed quiet to be polite, who trusted too easily, that woman had been buried right alongside William, the woman left behind. She was about to find out what it really meant to live in the aftermath of someone else's lies. The day of the will reading felt like walking into a courtroom where everyone already believed I was guilty. I almost didn't go. I paced around the house for an hour, keys in hand, coat draped over the chair. I kept thinking, what's the point? Whatever William left behind, it wouldn't matter. Nothing could undo what he'd done, but part of me needed to hear it. I needed to know if he at least acknowledged me in some way. I needed a reason, a fragment of closure. The lawyer's office was downtown, in a cold brick building that smelled like dust and old paper. I arrived last. The room was already full. Helena sat with her arms crossed tightly over her chest, flanked by her 2 adult children, their children. I hadn't even learned their names yet. To me, they were still the son who'd yelled at me and the daughter who wouldn't meet my eyes. They didn't acknowledge me when I walked in. I sat alone in the back corner, clutching my purse like it was a shield. The lawyer, an older man in a tan suit with weary eyes, cleared his throat and began. He spoke plainly, without drama. William's estate was significant, multiple properties, investment accounts, retirement funds, stock portfolios. I knew some of this, not the full scope, but I knew we'd lived comfortably. William was always frugal, always talking about saving for later. I just didn't know that later came with a landmine. He began listing the assets. A house in New Jersey left to Helena. A small trust for the daughter. Another for the son. I thought, okay, that makes sense. They were his kids. But I braced myself, waiting for my name to appear next, and then it did, for everything else. The lawyer read, Margaret Turner is named the sole beneficiary of the remaining estate, including but not limited to the marital home in Connecticut, all retirement accounts, investment portfolios, and personal savings, effective immediately. The room went silent. I didn't even breathe. Then I heard it, the sound of a chair scraping against the tile, followed by a choked gasp. It was Helena's son. He stood, face flushed red with fury, pointing straight at me like I'd just robbed them at gunpoint. She knew. She had to have known. You don't give someone everything unless they're in on it. The lawyer raised his hand to calm the room, but it didn't matter. Chaos had already been unleashed. You think we're just going to let you walk out with everything? The daughter spat at me. He was our father. You were just his distraction. I wanted to scream. I didn't ask for any of this. But I couldn't even find my voice. My cheeks burned. My throat felt like I'd swallowed sandpaper. I opened my mouth, tried to say something, anything, then Helena's eyes met mine. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't crying. She just looked hollow, and that hurt more than anything because in that moment, I saw my own face reflected in hers. We were both betrayed. But somehow, I was still the one painted as the thief. I stood, my legs shaking beneath me. The room pulsed with tension. I didn't know, I whispered. I never knew. No one answered. No one believed me. And so I walked out of that office. Out of the wreckage of Williams to lives, out into a world where now, I wasn't just a widow. I was the woman who stole everything. The stranger. The villain in someone else's story. And yet, I had never felt more alone in mine. I didn't open the front door for 2 days after the reading of the will. The outside world had turned hostile. And I knew I wasn't imagining it. The glances at the grocery store. The way neighbors avoided eye contact. The 2 women whispering by the post office as I walked past. My name wasn't just being spoken. It was being smeared. The local paper ran a piece, secret wife inherits fortune after businessman's death. It didn't mention my name directly, but everyone in town knew who it was about. The timing, the details, the implications, enough to ruin me. Inside my own house, I couldn't find peace either. Every corner reminded me of William. his slippers by the back door, his toothbrush still in the bathroom. I should have thrown it out. I didn't. I could in single quotes d. Instead, I sat in the kitchen, staring at a folder filled with bank statements, legal documents, and property titles all now under my name. Millions. That word didn't even feel real. When we were together, William never lived extravagantly. He liked simple things. He'd clip coupons and complain about wasteful spending. No luxury cars, no designer furniture, but apparently, while he was preaching frugality, he was building an empire. And now, all of it was mine, but I didn't feel rich. I felt contaminated. The money didn't comfort me, it haunted me. Every dollar was a reminder that I never truly knew the man I shared a bed with. Every asset felt like it came from a lie. I hired a lawyer not because I wanted to fight anyone, but because I had to make sure it was real. That William hadn't manipulated the documents while impaired. That I hadn't somehow, unknowingly, committed fraud just by existing. The lawyer confirmed it all. William had made the changes a year before his death while fully coherent. The paperwork was airtight. The decision had been his, but why? Why would he leave me everything knowing it would tear his other family apart? Knowing I'd become the target of their rage? I couldn't ask him now. But the silence he left behind screamed louder with each passing day. What made it worse was the pressure building outside the legalities. Helena's son emailed me directly, furious, unhinged. He called me a fraud, a parasite. He accused me of manipulating a dying man. He threatened to go public with everything, to sue me for inheritance theft. Even hinted that I'd driven William to the grave with stress. Helena's daughter wasn't much better. She posted about me constantly on social media, sometimes vague, sometimes explicit. She called me that woman who hid in plain sight and preyed on a broken marriage. Her followers believed every word. People I'd never met sent me private messages telling me to give the money back. That I didn't deserve it, that I should be ashamed. And the worst part? A small part of me did feel ashamed. I hadn't done anything wrong. But I had benefited from someone else's lies. One night, unable to sleep, I sat on the back porch watching the wind stir the trees. And I said it out loud for the first time. I don't want this, the house, the cars, the money, the lawsuits, the silence. I didn't want any of it. I just wanted my life back, the simple life, the one where I still believed in my husband, where my world made sense, that life was gone, dead. And in its place, I was left holding the ashes of a man who loved me and betrayed me. A man who chose to protect me financially but not emotionally, who lived two lives so cleanly that even in death he managed to destroy both. And now, I was alone with the fallout, alone and hated, and no amount of money in the world could make that feel any less heavy. I didn't plan to reach out to Helena, not at first. Part of me hoped she would contact me, to scream, to ask why, to accuse me to my face instead of through lawyers and online posts. But she did in single quotes d. So, after another week of silence, another week of waking up with my stomach in knots, I made the decision. It wasn't courage. It was desperation. I found a neutral spot, a small cafe halfway between our towns, where no one knew either of us. I sent her a message, polite and careful. I told her I didn't want a confrontation. I just wanted to talk, for both our sakes. To my surprise, she replied within an hour. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Don't be late. I barely slept that night. When I arrived, she was already seated. No makeup, dark circles under her eyes. Her hands folded tightly in front of her like she was holding herself together through sheer will. I hesitated before sitting. She didn't smile, didn't nod, just stared at me with a tired intensity that made it hard to breathe. I opened my mouth, but she spoke first. Did you love him? The question hit me like a slap. I didn't expect that to be her first words. I thought she'd ask how long I knew or why I didn't walk away. But no, just that. Did I love him? Yes, I said softly. I did. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Her jaw clenched. Her eyes filled for a moment, then blinked clear again. He told me you were a girlfriend, she said. One of many before we married. I asked once if you two ever reconnected. He laughed, told me not to worry. She sipped her coffee, her hands shaking slightly. He lied to both of us. For over 2 decades. 25 years of scheduling birthdays around business trips. 25 years of watching my kids wait by the window every June. Knowing he wouldn't be back until Christmas, I couldn't speak. You know what hurts the most? She continued. Not that he left everything to you. Not even that you didn't know about us. It's that for all these years, I thought I was the only one being tolerated. But it turns out we were both being kept. The word sat heavy between us. Kept, I echoed. Nodding slowly. I used to imagine our future, I said quietly. Sitting on the porch together, old and tired, watching the seasons go by. I thought we had time. She let out a bitter laugh. Time? That man divided every ounce of his time like a chessboard. Holidays were always the hardest, and now my children hate me because I didn't fight harder. They think I let this happen. That I wasn't enough. I looked up. Helena, I swear to you, I didn't know. Not 1 minute. If you had, she asked, not accusatory, just curious, would you have left? I hesitated. I don't know. I want to believe I would. But 27 years is a lot of memories to erase, she nodded again slowly. Same. We sat in silence, two women side by side, nursing identical wounds carved by the same man. Eventually, she pulled a worn envelope from her purse. He left this in our safe, she said. A copy of his original will. Before he changed it, she slid it across the table. In it. She had been the sole beneficiary. I think he knew he was dying, she said quietly. And I think somewhere he believed he had to choose. Maybe he thought leaving everything to you would make up for something. Maybe it was his idea of love. I stared at the paper. My name wasn't even on it. I didn't ask for the money, I said. I still don't know what to do with it. She looked at me, softer this time. Neither do I. We left the cafe without a handshake, no hugging, no closure. But as I walked away, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not peace, not forgiveness, but understanding. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward something that resembled healing. I didn't plan to reach out to Helena. Not at first. Part of me hoped she would contact me, to scream, to ask why. To accuse me to my face instead of through lawyers and online posts. But she didn't. So after another week of silence and of waking up with my stomach in knots, I made the decision. It wasn't courage. It wasn't courage. It was desperation. I found a neutral spot, a small cafe halfway between our towns, where no one knew either of us. I sent her a message, polite, careful. I told her I didn't want a confrontation, that I just wanted to talk, for both our sakes. To my surprise, she replied within an hour. Tomorrow at 10 o'clock, don't be late. I barely slept that night. When I arrived, she was already there. No makeup, dark circles under her eyes. Her hands folded tightly in front of her like she was holding herself together through sheer will. I hesitated for a moment before sitting. She didn't smile, didn't nod, just looked at me with a tired intensity that made it hard to breathe. I opened my mouth, but she spoke first. Did you love him? The question hit me like a slap. I didn't expect that to be her first words. I thought she'd ask how long I knew, why I didn't walk away. But no, just that. Did I love him? Yes, I said softly. I did. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes filled for a second, then cleared again. He told me you were a girlfriend, she said. One of many before we married. I asked once if you two ever reconnected. He laughed, told me not to worry. She sipped her coffee, her hands trembling slightly. He lied to both of us. For over 2 decades. 25 years of scheduling birthdays around business trips. 25 years of watching my kids wait by the window every June. Knowing he wouldn't be back until Christmas, I couldn't speak. You know what hurts the most? She went on. Not that he left everything to you. Not even that you didn't know about us. It's that for all these years, I thought I was the only one being tolerated. Turns out, we were both being kept. The word sat heavy between us. Kept, I repeated quietly. Nodding, I used to imagine our future, I said. Sitting on the porch together, old and tired, watching the seasons go by. I thought we had time. She let out a short, bitter laugh. Time. That man divided every ounce of his time like a chessboard. Holidays were always the hardest. And now? Now my children hate me because I didn't fight harder. They think I let this happen. That I wasn't enough. I looked up. Helena, I swear to you, I didn't know. Not for 1 minute. If you had, she asked, not accusatory, just curious, would you have left? I hesitated. I don't know. I want to believe I would have. But 27 years is a lot of memories to erase, she nodded slowly. Same. We sat in silence, two women side by side, nursing identical wounds carved by the same man. Eventually, she reached into her purse and pulled out a worn envelope. He left this in our safe, she said. A copy of his original will. Before he changed it, she slid it across the table. In it, she had been the sole beneficiary. I think he knew he was dying, she said quietly. And I think somewhere he believed he had to choose. Maybe he thought leaving everything to you would make up for something. Maybe it was his idea of love. I stared at the paper. My name wasn't even on it. I didn't ask for the money, I said. I still don't know what to do with it. She looked at me, softer this time. Neither do I. We left the cafe without a handshake. No hug, no closure. But as I walked away, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not peace, not forgiveness, but understanding. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward something that resembled healing. I didn't clean the garage door. For 3 days, I left the red letters smeared across the white panel, bold and angry, LIAR. Like a brand on my soul, neighbors drove by slower than usual. One of them offered to help paint over it. I declined. Part of me felt like I deserved it. Another part wanted the world to see it, to see what grief twisted into rage looked like. To see how one man's lie could unravel lives and leave a stranger holding the blame. But on the fourth morning, I woke up and decided I was done carrying shame that wasn't mine. I bought paint. I covered the letters. And for the first time in weeks, I looked in the mirror and didn't look away. That same day, I made a decision. If they wanted to make me the villain, I would respond like someone they couldn't define. I wouldn't react. I wouldn't apologize for things I didn't do. I would reclaim my life, one act at a time. I started increasing the anonymous donations. I transferred money to food pantries, shelters, senior homes. I even funded therapy for widows, quietly, silently. I wasn't doing it to redeem myself. I was doing it because giving away pieces of that poison inheritance felt like cutting thorns out of my own skin. But of course, it didn't take long for word to spread. Helena's daughter posted screenshots from court filings. "She's trying to buy forgiveness," one post read. "Guilt money," said another. "Keep your dirty hands off our father's legacy." Then came the formal court notice. Helena's children were suing me, contesting the will. The grounds: emotional manipulation, coercion of a vulnerable man, lack of mental capacity. I read the paperwork sitting alone in the same kitchen where William used to bring me tea. They were saying I manipulated him while he was dying, that I pressured him to change his will in my favor, that I isolated him from them on purpose. None of it was true. But truth didn't matter anymore. Perception did. I handed the papers to my lawyer, who assured me the case was flimsy. William's mental health had been perfectly intact when he made the changes. There were doctor's records, witness signatures, everything notarized. Still, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I stopped opening the curtains until one morning I found an envelope taped to my door. No stamp, no return address. Inside was a photo, me, standing outside the post office. Across the bottom, written in thick black marker, "How's the blood money, Maggie?" I dropped it on the floor and walked straight to the sink, vomiting until my whole body shook. I wasn't scared for my life. I was scared of becoming what they said I was. I called my lawyer again. "I want to settle," I said. "You don't need to," he replied. "I know," I said quietly, "but I want to." That same afternoon, I called Helena for the second time. She didn't sound surprised. "I've seen what they're doing," she said. "I didn't know about the photo. I don't want to fight anymore," I told her. "I'll divide the estate. Not because I owe them, but because I want to be free." There was silence. Then she said, "Meet me tomorrow." We met at the same cafe this time. She looked different, still tired, but warmer. Like something inside her had finally settled. She apologized for the things her children had done. Not just the lawsuit, but the hate campaign, the posts, the rumors. "They're angry," she said. "They don't know what to do with it." "I know," I said. Neither did I. We talked for over an hour about grief, about betrayal, about motherhood, and the absence of it in my life. Eventually, we reached an agreement. A legal, written, private settlement. A portion of the inheritance would go into a fund for her grandchildren. Another part would go to a nonprofit in William's name. The rest, I could do what I wanted with it. We walked out of the cafe together this time. Still not friends, but no longer enemies. When I got home that night, I stared at the living room walls. For the first time since the funeral, they didn't feel like they were closing in. I still had no husband, no children, no old friends, but I had something better, a door that was finally beginning to open. And I was ready to walk through it. I didn't tell anyone I was moving. Not the lawyer, not the neighbors, not even Helena. I needed quiet. I needed a clean break. Too many people had formed opinions about me based on things they didn't understand. Too many faces looked at me with either pity or contempt. There was no in between. So I packed my life in silence, carefully, methodically. I sold the house William and I had shared, our marital home, as the will called it. I couldn't stay. Every creaking floorboard felt like a lie. Every drawer I opened reminded me of a man who kept drawers the same way he kept secrets, tidy, locked, and labeled. I donated most of our furniture, gave away things that no longer felt like mine. I kept only the essentials, photo albums, my mother's teacups, a few books, clothes. I left behind all of William's things, not out of anger, but because they belonged to another life. I bought a small cottage 2 towns over. It was modest, a white fence, a maple tree in the front yard. There was no legacy here. No whispers. I was just another woman moving into a quiet street. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. Mornings were filled with birdsong and the distant sound of sprinklers turning on. I started each day with tea on the porch. I didn't check the news. I didn't look at my phone. I just sat there, breathing. The first time someone waved at me, a jogger passing by, I flinched. But she smiled. Just smiled. No suspicion. No recognition. And it felt like a small miracle. I found the local library and offered to volunteer. The director, a woman in her 60s named Ruth, welcomed me with open arms. She didn't ask about my past or why I was there. She just handed me a box of returned books and said, "Think you can alphabetize these?" I nearly cried. Soon, I started helping in the children's reading room on Saturdays. The laughter, the movement, the life, it reminded me that there were still corners of the world untouched by betrayal. I adopted a dog. A mutt from the local shelter, medium-sized, golden, with one floppy ear. I named her June after the month everything fell apart and the month I decided to rebuild. She followed me everywhere, slept by my bed, and watched me with eyes that never judged. In time, Helena reached out. She'd heard about my move and asked if I was okay. I told her I was. Then one Saturday, she came to visit. She brought cookies, not homemade, but from a bakery in her town she said I'd love. We sat on the porch with June at our feet and talked for hours. Not about William, but about books, the news, gardening-life. Her visits became monthly, then more frequent. One day, she brought her grandchildren. They were shy at first, unsure of me, but June worked her magic. By the end of the afternoon, they were playing fetch in my backyard and calling me Miss Maggie. I didn't know how to feel about that. I'd never had children, never thought I'd earn that kind of affection. But hearing it tentative, kind did something to me I hadn't felt in a long time. A sense of belonging. I didn't try to be anyone's replacement. I didn't offer advice or try too hard. I just was present, patient. And maybe in that stillness, they began to see me as something other than a shadow from their past. I still got mail from old places, still saw my name pop up in the occasional article. People don't let go of scandal easily. But in my new town, I wasn't the woman who inherited a fortune through betrayal. I was the woman who worked at the library, who adopted a shelter dog, who had a neighbor named Ruth and a porch with wind chimes. In that quiet, gentle life, I started to feel whole again. Not the same woman I'd been before she was gone, but someone new. Someone stronger. Someone who had survived the fire and walked out of it with grace. Then, one Saturday morning, it happened. A crisp, sunny day, the kind that feels peaceful, where even the air seems to forgive. I'd just come back from the farmer's market, June trotting beside me, when I saw the envelope on my front step. No return address. No handwriting. Just like the one before, I froze. The last time I'd gotten something like this, I ended up bent over my kitchen sink, shaking with fear and shame. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I wouldn't let a sealed envelope take my peace. Still, my hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were photocopies, documents, legal filings, screenshots from online forums, and at the top, one bold sentence in red marker: "You thought we were done." I didn't need a signature to know who it was from. Helena's son. I'd heard through a neighbor that he hadn't accepted the settlement. He said his mother had betrayed their father's memory by forgiving me. That she'd sold him out for a fund and some apologies. Apparently, he'd become obsessed, convinced that William had been coerced. He was digging through old emails, contacting William's former colleagues, collecting anything to reopen the case. That envelope was his warning he wasn't done with me. I called my lawyer immediately. He told me to stay calm. Nothing in the papers was new or actionable. But just hearing those words again: manipulation, fraud, unlawful influence, boiled something raw and painful back into the light. By Monday, the local news had picked up whispers of the accusations. Just a small blurb. Just enough. I stayed indoors for a week. The anxiety returned, wrapping around my throat like it had in those early days after the funeral. June never left my side. At night, I sat in bed, my laptop closed, trying to keep my hands from shaking. Then Helena called. "I heard what he's doing," she said softly. "I'm sorry." I stayed silent. "He's angry," she continued. "But he's not well, Maggie. He's not seeing things clearly. He's trying to destroy me," I said quietly. "No," she said firmly. "He's trying to punish someone because he doesn't know what to do with his grief. And I will not let him use me or William's memory to do that." 2 days later, she showed up at my door. She had called the Attorney General's office herself and filed a statement defending me. She went on record: "I had not coerced William. He had been clear, sound of mind, and made his choices out of guilt, not manipulation." Helena stood by me publicly. And when it came time for the hearing to decide if the case could even be reopened, she sat right beside me in the courthouse. Our lawyers spoke, the judge reviewed the evidence, and in less than 30 minutes, it was over. Case dismissed. No grounds. No new proof. No reopening. Outside the courtroom, reporters crowded around, shouting questions. I didn't say a word. Helena did. "She is not the villain," she said firmly. "She's another victim of the same man who deceived us all. My son needs help, not more pain. And Margaret deserves peace." I cried in the car afterward, not from relief, but because someone finally believed me, publicly, fiercely, later that week. I met Helena at the park. We sat beneath a large oak tree, watching her granddaughter play on the swings. She handed me a sandwich and said quietly, "You know, I used to think you were the woman who stole my husband." I didn't respond. She smiled gently. But now I know we were both just trying to survive the same storm from different windows. We sat in silence for a while, just breathing. And that's when I realized something. It wasn't the end of the pain, but it was the end of the chase. The end of trying to prove who I was or wasn't to people who had already made up their minds. Let them talk. Let them speculate. I had truth. I had peace. And for the first time since William's funeral, I had someone standing beside me when I needed it most. The house I bought was quiet but not lonely. It was the kind of quiet that felt earned. The soft hum of wind through the trees, June's occasional bark in the backyard, the creak of old floorboards beneath my feet. After everything, I had learned to cherish stillness. I started building something new. Nothing grand, nothing headline-worthy, just life. Real, quiet, simple life. I joined a community gardening group. I signed up for weekly cooking classes at the senior center. I volunteered at the library on Mondays and Fridays, reading to children whose parents were too busy or too tired. No one asked about my past. No one recognized me as that woman. Here, I was just Margaret, Miss Maggie to some, and I liked it that way. Every now and then, I still got letters. Thinly veiled messages from old acquaintances, former neighbors, sometimes even reporters trying to revisit the story. I threw them all away. They didn't deserve space in this new life I was building. One weekend, Helena came to visit. She brought a pie and a photo album. We looked through pictures of William, not the ones I knew, but the ones she did. Birthday parties, school plays, a man in a Halloween costume with his kids in tow. I expected to feel pain, but instead, I felt distance. She asked if I wanted to keep any photos. I took one, just one, a candid shot of William laughing with a baby girl on his shoulders. His daughter, the same girl who once called me a thief. I framed it and placed it in the back hallway. Not as a shrine, but as a reminder. A reminder of truth, of deception, of what it had cost everyone. Helena's relationship with her children was still strained. Her son had moved away. Her daughter kept her distance. But slowly, there were small steps, a phone call here, a shared lunch there. I never asked. It wasn't my place. But I saw the effort in Helena's eyes, the quiet determination of a mother, trying to rebuild a bridge from ashes. And then, one day, she brought them with her dot. It was fall, crisp air, golden leaves swirling like confetti. I'd set the table outside with a simple meal, roasted vegetables, baked chicken, fresh bread. Helena arrived with her daughter and two small children, the same granddaughter I'd met at the park, and a little boy, younger, holding his mother's hand. I was nervous. So was she. But kids are funny. They don't carry the weight adults do. The little girl ran straight to June. The boy followed. Helena's daughter stood stiffly at first, unsure. Then, after a stretch of awkward silence, she looked at me and said, "They call you Miss Maggie at the library?" I nodded. "They like you." She added, her voice measured, "They're good kids." I said simply, "We didn't talk about William, or money, or court cases. We talked about school lunches, about the weather, about dogs and books and recipes. Nothing heavy, but it was enough." After they left, I sat alone on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, a cup of tea in hand. The house was still but not empty. I looked around at the home I had created, the shelves filled with donated books. The garden I looked around my home, the small garden I'd started to plant. The rug June had claimed as her throne. The faint echoes of laughter that had filled the air that afternoon. It didn't replace the past. It didn't erase the betrayal. But it gave me something else, a beginning. And for the first time, I let myself think, maybe I'm not just surviving anymore. Maybe, just maybe, I'm starting to live. The invitation came in a simple white card with gold trim. Helena's handwriting, neat, deliberate. Christmas Eve dinner, bring June, no pressure. But we'd love to have you. I stared at it for hours, unsure whether to cry or smile. A year ago, I was the woman accused of stealing her husband's legacy. Now I was being invited to her family's table. It didn't feel like a victory, it felt fragile. But still, I went. The drive was quiet. Snow lined the roads in soft layers, the world muted under winter's hush. June sat in the back seat, her tail thumping every few minutes, her steady presence a comfort. When I arrived, Helena met me at the door, wrapped in a red sweater, her silver hair pinned neatly back. She hugged me, not stiffly, not out of politeness, but truly. It was an embrace that said, "I see you, and I don't resent you anymore." The living room was warm, filled with soft music and the scent of pine candles. Her grandchildren ran in circles, shrieking with laughter. Her daughter gave me a small nod from across the room, not quite a smile, but not a glare either. And that was enough. Dinner was simple roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, vegetables, two kinds of pie. We talked, passed dishes, and laughed like we'd done it 100 times before. Yet every moment felt surreal. Halfway through the meal, the little boy Helena's grandson turned to me. "Are you really Miss Maggie from the library?" he asked. I laughed. "That's what they call me," he nodded, satisfied. "Mom says you read the best stories." I glanced at his mother. Our eyes met, and this time she smiled. Later, after the dishes were cleared and the kids were building a Lego tower near the tree, Helena sat beside me on the couch with a glass of wine. "You know," she said softly, "last year I thought this night would never happen. I thought I'd never be able to look at you without anger." I nodded, quiet. "But now," she continued, "when I see you, I don't see betrayal. I see survival. I see grace." My throat tightened. I looked at the tree, the lights, the stockings. This home, this family so different from mine, so far from what I once imagined. And yet, here I was. "I never tried to replace you," I whispered. "I never even knew I had anything to replace." "I know," she said gently. "Now I do too." We didn't speak after that. We didn't need to. Just before I left, her granddaughter came up to me, holding a handmade card. Stick figures drawn in marker, one with a gray ponytail, the other with a floppy-eared dog. It said, "To Tia Maggie, Merry Christmas. Love, Tia Aunt." I stood at the door, card in hand, and my heart broke open, not from pain, but from the gentlest kind of healing. I had been cast as the outsider, the threat, the thief. But here, in this warm, imperfect, complicated room, I had a place. A new family. A new identity, not built on someone else's secrets, but on my truth, my choices. And the quiet dignity of having endured. As I drove home that night, snow beginning to fall again, I realized something. I had lost everything I thought mattered, and somehow I had gained something far more real. Spring came slowly, peeling back the cold from the earth. The maple tree in my front yard sprouted green leaves like tiny promises, and birdsong returned to the mornings. There was peace in the air, an unspoken understanding that some things must end so others can begin. Every morning, I walked June through the neighborhood trails, waving to familiar faces, chatting with the librarian about new releases, helping children pick out books on rainy afternoons. No one whispered about my past here. No one asked about William. They knew me simply as Miss Maggie, the woman who read aloud with too many voices, who always had dog treats in her coat pocket, who smiled even when her eyes sometimes carried shadows, and that was enough. But it wasn't always easy. Sometimes the past found its way back, a memory, a photograph tucked in an old book, an article someone forwarded without thinking. Sometimes at night, I'd wake up reaching for a space in bed that no longer belonged to anyone. But the ache was different now. It didn't bleed, it pulsed, quiet, manageable. I had learned to live with it. One afternoon, I sat on the porch with Helena. We didn't talk much anymore. When we met, we didn't need to. The silence between us had shifted from awkward to sacred. We drank tea, watched June roll in the grass, and listened to the laughter of her grandchildren echoing through the yard. Her daughter had started coming by more often. Her son, still distant, had sent a letter of apology, short but genuine. Healing was never linear, but it was happening. "I think about him sometimes," Helena said, her gaze lost in the sky. "Not the lies, just the moments. The man he let us see." I nodded. "Me too." We didn't pretend the good erased the bad. We didn't wrap him in forgiveness he hadn't earned. But we acknowledged the pieces he left behind and the strength it took to rise from their ruins. "I'm glad we didn't let him take everything from us," I said quietly. Helena turned to me, her expression soft. "He didn't. We still had ourselves. And now we have this an unlikely bond born from betrayal but shaped by choice." When she left that day, I stayed on the porch long after the sun dipped low. June rested her head on my foot. The breeze carried the scent of blooming lilacs, the kind my mother used to grow. And I thought about the woman I had been a year ago. The woman who stood at a funeral and discovered everything she knew was a lie. The woman who was humiliated, attacked, abandoned. The woman who inherited not just a fortune but a curse. I had buried that woman not with spite, but with reverence. Because she survived. In her place, I had become someone stronger. Someone who didn't need to scream to be heard. Someone who didn't need to prove anything to anyone. Someone who took a broken life and rebuilt it one quiet, steady brick at a time. I hadn't just found peace. I had claimed it on my own terms, not through revenge, but by outliving the storm. By outlasting the whispers. By choosing to walk in truth when every lie begged me to crumble. I stood, stretched, and watched the last light fade behind the trees. Tomorrow would come, as it always did, and I would be ready. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, and if you'd like, share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.